Montana Territory, 1868. The night air filled with screams as flames consumed the Lakota village. Nathaniel Reed stood frozen, watching horror unfold before him. His uniform, once a source of pride, now felt like a shroud of shame against his skin. Major Gerald Crawford moved through the chaos like a demon, barking orders with cold precision. "Leave no witnesses. This land will be cleansed tonight." Reed's fingers tightened around his rifle, but he couldn't raise it against the fleeing women and children. When a young Lakota woman with a small girl clutched at her chest darted past him, their eyes met for just a moment. Fear, desperation, and something else. A silent plea. "Run," Reed whispered, pointing toward the forest's edge. "That way." The woman nodded once, gathering her child closer. As they fled, Major Crawford appeared beside Reed, his face illuminated by the dancing flames. "What do we have here, Lieutenant?" Crawford's voice cut like ice. "Nothing, sir. Just checking the perimeter." Crawford's eyes narrowed. "Your duty is clear, Reed. No survivors." "They're just women and children, sir." "They're savages. All of them." Crawford raised his pistol toward the fleeing pair. Reed's body moved before his mind could caution him. He slammed into Crawford, sending the shot wild. "Run!" he shouted to the woman. Pain exploded in Reed's shoulder as Crawford's second shot found its mark. He fell to his knees, blood darkening his uniform. "Traitor!" Crawford spat, raising his gun again. A sudden explosion from a burning structure drew Crawford's attention. In that moment of distraction, Reed stumbled to his feet and disappeared into the smoke. Montana Territory, 1878. The memory faded as Nathaniel Reed opened his eyes to the wooden ceiling of his cabin. 10 years had passed, but the screams still haunted his dreams. He sat up slowly, his hand automatically moving to the puckered scar on his left shoulder. Outside, dawn painted the Montana sky in shades of amber and rose. His small ranch near Silver Creek sat nestled against a backdrop of pines and distant mountains. Nothing grand, a sturdy cabin, a modest barn, a corral with 3 horses, and a chicken coop. Enough for one man who preferred solitude. Reed pulled on his shirt, wincing slightly. The old wound always ached worse before a storm. He stepped onto the porch where his dog Max, a large brown mutt with one ear missing, greeted him with a lazy thump of his tail. "Morning, old friend." Reed scratched behind Max's remaining ear. "Storm's coming. Feel it?" A familiar figure approached on horseback. Samuel Kingston, his nearest neighbor at 70 years old, still rode like a man half his age. The old cavalry veteran had been Reed's only friend since he settled here 5 years ago. One of the few who knew fragments of his past. "Nate!" Samuel called out, dismounting with surprising agility. "Brought you those seeds I promised. Martha's sending extra bread, too. Says you're getting too thin." Reed smiled despite himself. "Martha needs to worry less about me and more about keeping you in line." "Ha! That woman has given up on that lost cause." Samuel handed over a sack of seed and a cloth-wrapped package that smelled of freshly baked bread. His weathered face grew serious. "Heard news in town. Raven's gang hit another homestead near Clearwater." Reed's expression darkened. "Anyone hurt?" "Family of 4, parents killed." Samuel removed his hat, revealing his silver hair. "Kids survived only because they were visiting relatives." Reed leaned against the porch post. "Raven's getting bolder." "That's not all," Samuel continued, voice lowering. "Word is they're led by a man they call the Black Eagle. Wears a mask, they say. And there's something else. Judge Crawford will be circuit riding through Silver Creek next month." Reed froze. "Crawford?" "Former Major Gerald Crawford. War hero turned justice of the peace." Samuel studied Reed carefully. "Same man you served under, if I recall correctly." Reed turned away, his jaw clenching. "That was another lifetime." "Past has a way of catching up, son." Samuel placed a gnarled hand on Reed's good shoulder. "Thought you should know." That night after Samuel left, Reed sat by his fireplace, a glass of whiskey untouched in his hand. The flames danced, transforming into the burning Lakota village in his mind. Crawford would be coming, the man who had ordered the massacre, who had shot Reed and left him for dead, the man who thought Reed had perished that night. "Let him come," Reed whispered to the fire. Some reckonings were long overdue. Reed jolted awake from yet another nightmare. In this one, the Lakota woman he'd saved stood before him, her dark eyes boring into his soul. "The child of two worlds comes," she had whispered. "Be ready." He shook off the dream's lingering chill and prepared for a day of hunting. The pantry needed stocking before winter set in. He saddled his chestnut gelding, Thunder, and with Max following at his heels, headed into the forest that bordered his property to the east. The morning passed quietly as Reed tracked a young buck through the pine forest. The air held that special crispness that heralded autumn's deepening embrace. He breathed deeply, letting the scent of pine and earth center him. Just as he prepared to take his shot, 3 gunshots echoed in rapid succession, pistol fire, not hunting rifles, followed by distant screams. Reed lowered his weapon, listening. The sounds had come from the old trading route that cut through the valley below. "Come on, boy," he murmured to Max. "Something's wrong." They moved swiftly through the trees, emerging at a ridge overlooking the trail. Below, an overturned wagon lay partially splintered, its canvas cover torn and flapping. 2 bodies lay motionless in the dirt. Reed approached cautiously, rifle ready. The first body was a man in his 30s, well-dressed in a merchant's clothes. The second was a woman with copper skin and dark hair braided in a style that mixed white and Lakota traditions. Both had been shot at close range. "Bandits," Reed muttered, noting the missing horses and ransacked supplies. The Ravens gang's hallmark brutality. A soft whimper caught his attention, so faint he almost missed it. Reed signaled Max to stay alert as he rounded the broken wagon. There, wedged between a wooden trunk and the wagon's frame, crouched a small girl. No more than 6 years old, with dark hair and striking green eyes that reminded him of the mountain lakes. Her blue dress was torn at the hem, and her small hands clutched a ragged cloth doll missing one arm. "Please don't hurt me, mister," she whispered, shrinking further into her hiding place. Reed immediately lowered his rifle, setting it on the ground. "I won't hurt you," he said softly, crouching to her level. "My name is Nate. What's yours?" The child regarded him warily. "Lily," she finally answered, her voice barely audible. "Are you hurt, Lily?" Reed asked, noting with relief no visible injuries. She shook her head, then glanced beyond him. "Are Mama and Papa sleeping?" The question hit Reed like a physical blow. He swallowed hard. "Yes," he said gently. "They're sleeping." He extended his hand slowly. "It's not safe here, Lily. Bad men might come back." Lily clutched her doll tighter. "Mr. Patches says we should be careful of strangers." Reed nodded seriously. "Mr. Patches is right, but sometimes we need help from new friends. I promise to keep you safe." While Lily considered this, Reed carefully searched the wagon, finding a small trunk that had been overlooked by the bandits, likely because it contained only clothing and personal items. Inside, he discovered a photograph of Lily's parents, the woman wearing a traditional Lakota necklace alongside the merchant husband. As he suspected, Lily's mother had been part Lakota. He also found papers identifying the man as Thomas Williams, a trader from St. Louis, and his wife as Sarah Williams. They had been traveling to Oregon to start a new life. Reed returned to Lily, who had not moved from her hiding place. "I need to take care of your mama and papa before we go," he explained gently. "Would you sit with Max? He's a good dog." To his surprise, Max, usually wary of strangers, approached Lily and settled beside her, resting his head on his paws. The child hesitantly reached out to touch his fur. With Lily distracted, Reed set about the grim task of burying her parents. He worked quickly but respectfully, using a small shovel from the wagon to dig graves beneath a tall pine tree. He placed Sarah's Lakota necklace on her before covering both bodies, marking the graves with crosses made from broken wagon parts. When the task was done, Reed returned to find Lily asleep against Max's side, exhausted from fear and grief. As he gently lifted her, her sleeve pulled back, revealing a small birthmark shaped like an arrowhead on her shoulder. Reed froze, a memory flashing before him. The small Lakota girl from that night 10 years ago, held in her mother's arms. She had the same birthmark, visible when her blanket slipped as they fled. "It can't be," he whispered. But the resemblance was unmistakable. This child was connected to the woman he had saved. Not her daughter as he first thought, but perhaps her niece or granddaughter. The coincidence seemed impossible, yet here she was, placed directly in his path. His dream echoed in his mind. The child of two worlds comes. Reed made his decision. Rather than taking Lily to Silver Creek, where she would likely be sent to an orphanage or distant relatives who might reject her mixed heritage, he would bring her to his ranch, at least temporarily until he could learn more. Lily, he said softly, waking her, we need to go now. I'm taking you somewhere safe. Where? She asked, rubbing her eyes. To my home. It's not far. Reed helped her onto Thunder, then mounted behind her. Hold tight to Mr. Patches. As they rode away, Reed couldn't shake the feeling that their meeting was no coincidence. The child from that night of horrors had somehow found her way back to him. A second chance, perhaps, to make right what had gone so terribly wrong. I'll keep you safe, he whispered, more to himself than to Lily. This time, I promise. Silver Creek had grown considerably in the 5 years since Reed settled in the area. What had once been little more than a trading post now boasted a proper main street with a general store, saloon, blacksmith, small schoolhouse, and a dozen other establishments. Most significant was the new railroad spur connecting the town to the main line, bringing growth and new settlers almost weekly. The town had also developed a small community of Lakota and mixed heritage families who lived along its eastern edge, tolerated by most townsfolk for their valuable skills and trading connections, though rarely fully embraced. A week after finding Lily, Reed rode into town with the child perched before him on Thunder's saddle. These days, he rarely visited Silver Creek more than once a month for supplies, preferring his solitude to the curious stares and whispers that followed a man with his mysterious past. But Lily needed proper clothing, and Reed's pantry required restocking to feed an additional mouth. Heads turned as they made their way down the main street. Reed ignored the stares, focusing instead on Lily, who gazed wide-eyed at the buildings and people. Is this your town? She asked, her small voice stronger now after days of gradually opening up. Just where I come for supplies, Reed explained. My ranch is a few miles outside town, but first we need to get you some proper clothes and food. They stopped at Winter's General Store, where Reed lifted Lily down from the saddle. We'll get you fixed up here, he promised. Inside, Martha Winters looked up from her ledger, adjusting her spectacles. At 65, she remained sharp as a tack and missed nothing that happened in Silver Creek. Nathaniel Reed, she exclaimed, haven't seen you in nearly 2 months. Her gaze immediately fell on Lily, who partially hid behind Reed's leg. And who might this young lady be? Before Reed could answer, the bell above the door chimed. A woman entered, tall and slender, with dark hair pinned neatly beneath a modest hat. Her brown eyes quickly found Lily, then moved to Reed with unmistakable suspicion. Mrs. Winters, she said, her voice clear and confident. I've come for those medical supplies we discussed. Dr. Holloway, perfect timing. They arrived on yesterday's train. Martha bustled toward the back of the store. Dr. Grace Holloway approached Reed and Lily, her smile warm for the child but cooler for the man. I don't believe we've met properly. I'm Grace Holloway, the doctor in Silver Creek. Nathaniel Reed, he replied with a polite nod. I have a small ranch outside of town. And who is this? Grace asked, kneeling to Lily's level. I'm Lily, the child said softly, clutching Mr. Patches tighter. Mr. Nate found me when the bad men came. Grace's eyes shot up to meet Reed's, her expression hardening. Is that so? How interesting, considering I observed you finding this child by an overturned wagon several days ago. Reed stiffened. You were watching us? I was gathering medicinal herbs in that area, Grace explained, rising to her feet. I saw you bury 2 people and take the child. I followed at a distance to ensure she wasn't being abducted, but lost your trail in the forest. She placed a protective hand on Lily's shoulder. Sheriff Carter might be interested to know how you came by this child, Mr. Reed. Reed's expression remained controlled, though his jaw tightened. Those outlaws killed her parents. I buried them properly. What would you have had me do? Leave her there? No, Grace admitted after studying him, but taking a child requires legal proceedings. There are procedures. I'm aware, Reed interrupted quietly. That's why we're here today, to speak with Sheriff Carter and make arrangements. Their conversation was interrupted by Martha returning with Grace's supplies. The tension between them remained palpable as Grace paid for her order. From outside, Deputy Victor Reese observed the interaction through the store window. His cold eyes narrowed at the sight of the child's doll before he turned and walked briskly toward the sheriff's office. As Grace prepared to leave, she paused at the door. I'll be calling on you tomorrow, Mr. Reed, to check on Lily's health. Children who experience trauma need proper care. That won't be necessary, Reed began. It wasn't a request, Grace said firmly. Either I examine her at your ranch or you bring her to my clinic. Your choice. After she departed, Reed purchased supplies for Lily, dresses, shoes, a coat for the approaching autumn, and food that would be easy to prepare. He added candy sticks at Lily's delighted gasp, and after a moment's consideration, a small wooden horse that caught her eye. For when Mr. Patches needs a friend, he told her, rewarded by the first genuine smile he'd seen on her face. As they left town with Lily wearing one of her new dresses, Reed couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Scanning the street, he caught sight of Deputy Reese observing them from the shadows of the jailhouse porch, his expression unreadable. Instinct told Reed that Dr. Holloway wasn't the only one with questions about Lily, and some questions, he knew from bitter experience, came with dangerous intentions. Reed's cabin had never felt so alive. Lily moved through the small space with cautious curiosity, examining his few possessions with the innocent wonder only a child could possess. Max followed her devotedly, having appointed himself her guardian. Reed had spent the previous evening preparing a small area in the cabin's loft, accessible by a sturdy ladder. He'd cleaned it thoroughly, added a straw mattress with fresh blankets, and hung a curtain for privacy. It wasn't much, but Lily's eyes had widened with delight when he showed it to her. My very own place? She'd asked in disbelief. All yours, Reed had confirmed, and we can make it nicer. Add some color, maybe. Now, as morning light filtered through the cabin windows, Reed found himself making breakfast for two, something he hadn't done in years. The simple domesticity of it felt foreign, yet oddly comforting. Can I help? Lily asked, standing on tiptoes to peer at the eggs frying in the cast-iron pan. Reed hesitated, then nodded. You can set the table. 2 plates from that shelf there. As they ate, Reed considered the day ahead. Dr. Holloway would be coming, and he needed to prepare Lily and himself for her questions. Lily, he said gently, do you remember the lady from the SARTA yesterday, Dr. Holloway? Lily nodded, focused on feeding a small piece of egg to Max under the table. She's coming to visit today. She's a doctor who helps people feel better, and she wants to make sure you're healthy. Am I sick? Worry crossed Lily's face. No, Reed assured her, but sometimes doctors check on children even when they're not sick, just to make sure they stay healthy. Like how you check your horses every morning? Reed smiled. Exactly like that. A knock at the door announced Grace Holloway's arrival sooner than expected. Reed opened the door to find her standing on his porch, medical bag in hand, her horse tethered to the hitching post. Dr. Holloway, he greeted her, stepping aside. You're early. I have patients in town this afternoon, she explained, entering the cabin. Her gaze swept the interior, taking in the simple but clean surroundings. Her expression revealed surprise. Perhaps she'd expected worse from a solitary rancher. Lily emerged from behind the curtain partition that separated Reed's sleeping area from the main room, clutching Mr. Patches. Grace immediately softened, kneeling to the child's level. Hello, Lily. Do you remember me from the store? I'm Dr. Holloway. Lily nodded shyly. I'd like to check that you're healthy. Would that be all right? Grace opened her medical bag, bringing out a wooden stethoscope. This lets me listen to your heart. Would you like to hear it too? The examination proceeded smoothly, with Grace's gentle manner putting Lily at ease. Reed watched from a respectful distance, impressed despite himself by the doctor's skill with children. She's physically healthy, Grace told Reed afterward, while Lily played with Max near the fireplace. But she's experienced significant trauma. Children process grief differently than adults. What should I do? Reed asked, surprising himself with how much he cared about the answer. Grace studied him. Talk to her. Answer her questions honestly, but in ways appropriate for her age. Establish routines. Children find security in knowing what to expect. And she hesitated. She needs education. I can teach her basics, Reed said. Reading, writing, numbers. And beyond that, Grace challenged, a girl needs proper schooling, guidance from a woman as she grows. Reed met her gaze steadily. Are you offering to teach her, Dr. Holloway? Grace seemed taken aback by the direct question. I suppose I could provide lessons twice weekly. I already teach at the schoolhouse 3 days. But that doesn't solve the larger issue. Which is? A child, especially a girl with mixed heritage, needs stability and protection that, she paused, measuring her words, that a single man with your background might struggle to provide. Reed's expression hardened. My background? People talk, Mr. Reed. You arrived here 5 years ago with scars that weren't all visible, refusing to speak of your past. You avoid town gatherings, keep to yourself. Grace's voice softened slightly. I'm not judging you, but others will if you petition for guardianship. A heavy silence fell between them, broken only by Lily's soft murmurs to the dog. I made her a promise, Reed finally said. I intend to keep it. Grace's expression suggested she wanted to argue further but thought better of it. I'll return on Wednesday to begin Lily's lessons, in exchange for game meat for my clinic patients and perhaps some repair work for my cabin roof before winter. Reed nodded agreement. As he walked her to the door, Grace paused, her hand on the frame. Mr. Reed, she said quietly, Sheriff Carter is a good man, but his deputy, Reese, was asking questions about you and Lily this morning. I thought you should know. The warning hung between them, an unexpected gesture of alliance. Thank you, Reed said simply. After Grace departed, Reed stood on the porch watching her ride away, conflicted about this woman who challenged him, yet seemed genuinely concerned for Lily's welfare. A small hand slipped into his. Is Dr. Holloway going to teach me like my mama did? Lily asked. Reed looked down at her upturned face, feeling a surge of protectiveness he hadn't experienced in years. Yes, would you like that? Lily nodded solemnly. She smells like flowers and medicine, like Mama did sometimes. Reed crouched to her level, meeting her eyes directly. Lily, do you remember much about your mama? She sang songs in a different language, Lily said, her brow furrowing in concentration. And she told stories about her mama, who was a special lady in her tribe. Her tribe? Reed prompted gently. The people with the eagle feathers, Lily explained. Mama said her mama was Morning Star, an important lady who knew secrets. Reed felt his heart quicken. Morning Star, could it be the same woman he had saved that night? The timing would fit. What kind of secrets? He asked casually. Lily shrugged. Don't know, but she said Mr. Patches would keep me safe. She held up the raggedy doll. He's magic. Reed smiled at the childish fancy, but something in her words nagged at him. He made a mental note to examine the doll more carefully when Lily wasn't watching. Did your mama have any other family? Reed asked gently. Brothers or sisters, maybe? Lily's brow furrowed in concentration. She talked about a brother sometimes, Uncle Tommy, but Mama said he went away. She picked at a loose thread on Mr. Patches. She cried when she talked about him. Want to help me feed the chickens? He asked, deciding further questions could wait. Want to help me feed the chickens? He asked, deciding further questions could wait. Lily brightened, slipping her small hand into his larger one with growing trust. Can I name them? Every last one, Reed promised, marveling at how quickly the small person had upended his solitary existence and at how little he minded. Later, as Lily slept in her new loft bed, Reed sat by the fire cleaning his rifle, his thoughts circling back to Grace Holloway's warning about Deputy Reese. The man had a reputation for being Crawford's eyes and ears in towns before the judge arrived on his circuit. If Crawford was coming to Silver Creek, and if Reese had taken interest in Lily, Reed reassembled his rifle with practiced precision. The past was catching up faster than he'd anticipated. This time, however, he had more than just himself to protect. Let them come, he whispered to the dancing flames. He'd faced worse odds before, and this time, he had something worth fighting for. The autumn days settled into a rhythm. Reed found himself rising earlier than usual, taking quiet pleasure in preparing breakfast before Lily woke. The child's presence transformed his routine in unexpected ways. Chores that had once been solitary obligations became opportunities for small teachings. How to collect eggs without frightening the hens, why the horses needed daily brushing, which plants in his small garden were ready for harvesting. Lily absorbed these lessons eagerly, her initial shyness giving way to curiosity and occasional bursts of chatter that filled the once silent cabin. Max rarely left her side, his graying muzzle often resting protectively against her small feet during meals. On Wednesday morning, Reed stood on the porch watching for Grace's arrival. True to her word, The doctor had arranged to provide lessons for Lily twice weekly. He still wasn't entirely comfortable with the arrangement. Grace's penetrating gaze sometimes felt like it could uncover the secrets he'd buried deep, but he recognized the necessity of it. "Is Dr. Holloway coming today?" Lily asked, while joining him on the porch clutching a small slate Reed had purchased in town. "She should be here soon," Reed confirmed, noticing the child's unusual fidgeting. "Are you nervous about your lessons?" Lily nodded, her eyes downcast. "What if I'm not smart enough? Mama started teaching me letters, but that was a long time ago." Reed crouched to her level, waiting until she met his gaze. "Lily, being smart isn't about already knowing things. It's about wanting to learn them. And you're one of the most curious people I've ever met." Her expression brightened slightly. "Really?" "Really." Reed tapped the slate gently. "Besides, everyone starts somewhere. I couldn't read until I was older than you." "But you can read now." "Exactly my point, Yvette." He straightened as Grace's wagon appeared on the horizon. "Here she comes, ready to show her how curious you are." The lesson took place at the kitchen table, with Reed ostensibly working on mending harnesses nearby, though his attention frequently drifted to the pair. Grace proved to be a patient teacher, building on Lily's existing knowledge rather than highlighting gaps. "You've already taught her some basics," Grace observed during a break when Lily went outside with Max. "Her alphabet is nearly complete, and she recognizes several simple words." Reed continued his leatherwork, uncomfortable with the praise. "Just reviewed what her mother started." "You're good with her," Grace persisted. "It's unexpected." Reed's hand stilled. "Because of my background?" he asked, an edge to his voice. Grace held his gaze. "Precisely. Most men with your particular set of scars, physical and otherwise, don't typically demonstrate such nurturing capabilities." "You don't know anything about me, Dr. Holloway." "I know more than you might think, Mr. Reed." Grace gathered her teaching materials methodically. "For instance, I know you understand Lakota. You corrected Lily's pronunciation earlier when she was reciting the counting song I taught her." Reed tensed imperceptibly. "I picked up some words during my time out west." "A cavalry soldier learning the enemy's language?" Grace raised an eyebrow. "Unusual." "Who said I was cavalry?" A slight smile touched Grace's lips. "Your posture when you stand at attention. The way you instinctively check sight lines when entering a room. The precision in how you maintain your weapons." She closed her book with finality. "I'm observant, Mr. Reed. It's necessary in my profession." Before Reed could respond, Lily burst back inside, excitement animating her features. "Mr. Nate, Max found a rabbit nest. Can we watch them but not touch them like you showed me with the bird's nest?" The tension dissolved as Reed nodded, grateful for the interruption. "As long as Max keeps his distance too." Later, after Grace departed with promises to return Saturday, Reed took Lily to the small creek that cut through his property. The afternoon sun dappled the water through yellowing leaves as he showed her how to skip stones across the surface. "Like this?" Lily asked, tossing a pebble that promptly sank. "Almost." Reed demonstrated again, his stone bouncing 4 times before disappearing. "It's all in the wrist." After several failed attempts, Lily managed a single skip, her delighted laughter echoing against the trees. The sound stirred something long dormant in Reed's chest, a warmth he'd nearly forgotten existed. "My papa was teaching me this before." Lily's voice trailed off, her momentary joy overshadowed by memory. Reed sat beside her on a fallen log. "It's okay to talk about them, Lily, and it's okay to miss them." Lily stared at the water. "Will I forget them?" "No," Reed said gently. "The people we love stay with us, even when they're gone." "Like your family?" Lily asked innocently. "Do you miss them too?" The question caught Reed off guard. He rarely spoke of his past, but Lily's open gaze demanded honesty. "Yes," he admitted. "I had a sister about your age when I was young. She got very sick one winter. I still think about her sometimes." "What was her name?" "Emma." The name felt strange on his tongue after so many years of silence. Lily considered this, then placed her small hand atop his. "Maybe Emma and my mama and papa are together, watching us skip stones." Reed swallowed hard against the unexpected tightness in his throat. "Maybe they are." As dusk approached, they headed back to the cabin. Reed noticed Lily studying him with an intensity that seemed beyond her years. Mr. Nate? She finally asked. Are you my father now? Reed stopped, kneeling before her. The question he'd been dreading had finally come. He could have offered platitudes or comfortable lies, but something in her steady gaze demanded truth. No, Lily, I can't replace your father. He chose his words carefully, but I made you a promise to keep you safe, and I intend to honor that promise for as long as you need me. And if I need you for a very long time, then I'll be here for a very long time. Reed meant every word, surprised by the certainty he felt. Lily nodded solemnly, seemingly satisfied. As they continued walking, her hand found his again, small fingers wrapping around his calloused ones with simple trust. Unknown to them, Samuel Kingston had arrived at the cabin and witnessed their exchange from a distance. The old man's weathered face creased in a thoughtful smile as he watched the unlikely pair approach. Well now, Samuel muttered to himself, never thought I'd see the day. As Reed and Lily reached the cabin clearing, Samuel called out a greeting. Max barked once in recognition, then settled. Samuel, Reed acknowledged, wasn't expecting you today. Just passing through, Samuel replied, his eyes twinkling as he tipped his hat to Lily. Thought I'd check on my neighbor and meet the young lady I've been hearing about. Lily half hid behind Reed's leg, suddenly shy. This is my friend Samuel, Reed explained. He lives a few miles from here. Pleased to make your acquaintance, Miss Lily, Samuel said with exaggerated formality that brought a small smile to the child's face. While Reed prepared a simple supper, Samuel entertained Lily with tales of his prospecting days, carefully edited for young ears. His gaze occasionally drifted to Mr. Patches, who sat propped against a chair, his mismatched button eyes reflecting the firelight. After Lily went to bed, Samuel accepted a cup of coffee laced with whiskey, his expression turning serious. Words spreading about the girl, he said quietly, and not just in town. Reed's jaw tightened. Meaning? Raven's gang's been asking questions, specifically about a doll. Samuel nodded toward Mr. Patches. That doll. Why would outlaws care about a child's toy? Samuel leaned forward. Remember that Lakota legend I told you about? The lost gold of Spirit Mountain? Reed nodded. The story was well known in the territory. A significant gold deposit hidden by the Lakota after encroaching settlers massacred a village. Its location had allegedly been entrusted to a single keeper of knowledge. Some folks think it ain't just a legend, Samuel continued. Word is the Ravens are hunting for a map that was split into pieces for safekeeping. One piece supposedly hidden in a child's toy. Reed's gaze shifted to the worn doll, seeing it with new eyes. Could Lily's attachment to it be more than childish comfort? There's more, Samuel added grimly. That woman who was killed, Lily's mother, description matches Sarah Blackfeather, granddaughter of Morning Star. Morning Star, Reed repeated, the name sending a chill through him. The keeper of the tribe's secrets. Samuel nodded. If that doll contains what they're looking for, Reed didn't need him to finish. Lily wasn't just a traumatized orphan. She was potentially the key to a treasure that dangerous men would kill to obtain. And if Crawford was involved, as Reed suspected, I need to check that doll, Reed said quietly, without frightening Lily. Sooner rather than later, Samuel agreed, rising to leave. Those Ravens aren't known for patience or mercy. After Samuel departed, Reed stood in the doorway of his cabin, watching the darkness beyond his small cleared land. The peaceful rhythm he'd begun to establish with Lily now seemed fragile, threatened by forces gathering just beyond his sight. He checked his rifle and pistol before retiring, placing them within easy reach. Whatever came, he would be ready. The promise he'd made took on new weight. He wasn't just protecting an orphan child anymore, but possibly the guardian of a secret that could reshape the territory's future, and perhaps, finally, deliver the reckoning with Crawford that was long overdue. 3 days later, a brutal storm swept across the Montana territory. Rain lashed against the cabin windows as thunder shook the very foundations. Reed had spent the day reinforcing the barn and ensuring the animals were secure, returning to the cabin drenched despite his oilskin coat. Lily had been unusually quiet all day, her normally bright eyes dulled. When Reed placed a hand on her forehead at supper, alarm shot through him. Her skin burned with fever. Just tired, she mumbled, barely touching her food. You're sick, Lily, Reed said gently. Let's get you to bed. He carried her to the loft, tucking blankets around her small frame. Max whined anxiously from below, sensing something was wrong. As the night progressed, Lily's condition worsened. Her breathing grew labored, and she tossed restlessly, calling for her mother in both English and broken Lakota. Reed bathed her forehead with cool water, his mind racing back to another bedside vigil long ago. His sister Emma, her small body ravaged by fever. The memory of his helplessness then fueled his determination now. "Not again," he whispered fiercely. "Not this time." When Lily began shivering violently despite her burning skin, Reed made his decision. Wrapping her in blankets, he carried her downstairs. "Hold on, little one," he murmured, settling her before the fire. "I'm going for help." The storm had intensified, turning the trail to town into a treacherous mire. Reed rode Thunder at a dangerous pace, the gelding struggling against wind and mud. Lightning split the sky, momentarily illuminating the path ahead like midday. Silver Creek lay mostly dark when he arrived, only the saloon and doctor's office showing lights. Reed headed straight for the small white building with Dr. G. Holloway painted neatly on a hanging sign. He pounded on the door, water streaming from his hat and coat. When Grace opened it, surprise registered briefly on her face before professional concern took over. "Mr. Reed, It's Lily," he interrupted, voice rough with worry. "High fever, chills, breathing's not right." Grace acted immediately, gathering the supplies into her medical bag. "Symptoms? How long?" "Started this morning, worsened after sunset." Reed paced the small waiting room. "She's calling for her mother, delirious." Grace paused, studying him. "You rode through this storm rather than waiting until morning." It wasn't a question, but Reed answered anyway. "I've seen fever take a child overnight." The raw pain in his voice revealed more than he intended. Something shifted in Grace's expression, recognition, perhaps, of a shared understanding. Without further comment, she donned her own oilskin coat and grabbed her bag. "My buggy would only slow us down in this mud," she said. "I'll ride with you." The journey back seemed even longer, the storm unrelenting. Grace sat behind Reed on Thunder, one arm around his waist for balance, the other protecting her medical bag. They spoke little, focused on navigating the treacherous path. When they finally reached the cabin, Reed lifted Grace down from the saddle, their eyes meeting briefly in the darkness. For a moment, something unspoken passed between them, mutual concern transcending their previous wariness. Inside, they found Lily thrashing weakly on the pallet Reed had made before the fire. Max lay beside her, refusing to leave despite Reed's earlier commands. Grace immediately knelt beside the child, professional detachment masking her worry. "Fetch clean water, both hot and cold," she instructed, opening her bag, "and more lanterns if you have them." For hours, Grace worked tirelessly. She prepared herbal mixtures from her supplies, coaxing Lily to swallow small sips. She applied cool compresses to the child's forehead and chest, then mustard plasters to her feet. All the while, she spoke soothingly, alternating between English and, surprisingly, fluent Lakota. Reed assisted silently, following Grace's instructions without question. Between tasks, he found himself studying the doctor with new appreciation. Her movements were efficient yet gentle, her focus absolute. This was a different woman from the guarded, somewhat judgmental doctor he'd met previously. Near midnight, during a brief respite while Lily slept fitfully, Grace accepted a cup of coffee from Reed. "The fever's still high, but her breathing has improved," she said quietly. "Children can spike fevers quickly, but they often recover just as rapidly." Reed nodded, exhaustion evident in the lines of his face. "I've seen it before. My sister..." He hesitated, unaccustomed to sharing personal history. "You lost her to fever," Grace finished gently. "Scarlet fever. I was 15. Our parents were already gone, father to the war, mother to grief after him." Reed stared into the fire. "I worked odd jobs to keep us fed, but that winter was brutal. By the time I could afford the doctor..." He left the rest unsaid. Grace's eyes reflected compassion without pity. "Is that why you left home to join the cavalry?" Reed looked up sharply. "You seem very certain about my past." "As I said before, I observe." Grace sipped her coffee. "You don't have to confirm or deny. Everyone has chapters they prefer to keep closed." From the pallet, Lily suddenly cried out in Lakota, words flowing too rapidly for Reed to follow. Grace responded immediately, kneeling beside her and replying in the same language, her tone soothing. When Lily calmed, falling back into restless sleep, Reed couldn't contain his curiosity. You speak Lakota fluently. Not something taught in medical school, I imagine. Grace's hand stilled on the compress she was re-wetting. No, she agreed softly. I lived with the Lakota for several years after being adopted by their medicine man, Swift Eagle. He found me nearly dead from diphtheria after my missionary parents succumbed to the same illness. You're not what I expected, dear Holloway, Reed admitted. A small smile touched her lips. Nor you, Mr. Reed. Swift Eagle took me in after finding me near death, Grace continued, her expression distant with memory. He had just lost his nephew, a promising warrior, in a raid led by soldiers. He said saving me helped heal his grief. Reed noticed a shadow cross her face. You lost someone too, didn't you? Beyond your missionary parents. Grace's hand stilled. My brother, he was taken from our village when I was very young, adopted by a Lakota family after our parents died in the same epidemic that nearly claimed me. He became a warrior, a protector. Her voice dropped nearly to a whisper. I searched for him for years, only to discover he had died defending his people against a cavalry attack. As dawn approached, Lily's fever broke. The transition was sudden, one moment burning hot, the next drenched in sweat. Grace sighed with relief, instructing Reed to help her change Lily into dry clothing while she prepared a strengthening broth. As Reed carefully changed Lily's nightgown, something caught his eye, a thin line of stitching on Mr. Patches, whom Lily had clutched throughout her illness. The stitching was different from the rest of the doll, newer and more precise, forming a nearly invisible seam along the doll's back. His conversation with Samuel came rushing back. Before he could examine it further, Lily stirred. Mama, she murmured, eyes still closed. It's Nate, he said gently, and Dr. Holloway is here too. Lily's eyes fluttered open, focusing with difficulty. When she saw Grace preparing broth at the stove, she said something in Lakota that made the doctor freeze. What did she say? Reed asked. Grace turned slowly. She called me the woman of the lost soul. Her voice held a strange note. It's what the Lakota called those who walked between worlds, people who belonged to both white and native societies but felt at home in neither. Lily spoke again, still in Lakota, her voice stronger. She says her grandmother told stories about people like me, Grace translated, approaching the pallet, and that Mr. Patches told her in a dream I could be trusted with his secret. Reed and Grace exchanged glances. Lily, Reed said carefully, what secret does Mr. Patches have? But Lily had already drifted back to sleep, her breathing finally even and peaceful. Later, when Lily woke fully, she remembered nothing of her fever dreams or Lakota utterances. She accepted broth from Grace and listened to Reed's story about braving the storm to fetch the doctor, her eyes wide with wonder. While Lily rested, Grace took the opportunity to examine her properly. Reed stepped outside to check on Thunder and the other animals, giving them privacy. When he returned, Grace was sitting at the table, her expression troubled. What is it? Reed asked, instantly alert. Lily will recover fully, Grace assured him, but I found something while examining her, a small pouch sewn into the back of her doll. She placed a piece of soft deerskin on the table between them. It was no larger than Reed's palm, covered with faded symbols and what appeared to be a partial map. I recognize the Lakota markings, Grace explained. It says, Protect our legacy, daughter of Morning Star. The rest appears to be half of a map, showing mountains and a river, but it ends abruptly as if it's only one piece of a larger map, Reed finished, Samuel's warning echoing in his mind. Exactly, Grace studied him. This isn't just about a child's doll, is it? Reed debated how much to reveal. Trust didn't come easily after years of guarding his past, but Grace had proven herself in ways he hadn't anticipated. Have you heard the legend of Spirit Mountain's gold? He finally asked. Grace's eyes widened slightly. The Lakota treasure? Swift Eagle mentioned it, though he never confirmed whether it was truth or myth. She glanced toward the sleeping Lily. You think this is related? Reed explained Samuel's warning about the Ravens gang searching for a map hidden in a child's toy. If Lily's mother was indeed Sarah Blackfeather, granddaughter of Morning Star, Then she was carrying part of a map that could lead to the Lakota's hidden gold, Grace concluded, and the Ravens killed her and her husband for it. They may not know Lily survived, Reed said, or that the map was successfully hidden in the doll. But they're searching, Grace pointed out, and if Judge Crawford is involved, as your friend suspects, the implication hung heavy between them. Crawford wouldn't hesitate to use his judicial authority to claim Lily and her doll if he believed it would lead him to gold. We need to keep this quiet, Reed said, at least until we understand exactly what we're dealing with. Grace nodded agreement, carefully rewrapping the deerskin. I should return this to the doll before Lily notices it missing. As she rose to do so, their hands brushed briefly. The accidental contact seemed to heighten Reed's awareness of her, not just as the town doctor or Lily's teacher, but as a woman who had witnessed his vulnerability and shared some of her own. Thank you, he said simply, for coming, for helping her. Grace's expression softened. Children deserve our protection. Always. After a pause, she added, I'll return tomorrow to check on her. And perhaps we should discuss what this means for your guardianship petition. The reminder of the legal proceedings sobered Reed immediately. With Crawford coming to oversee cases, and now this connection to the Lakota gold, the obstacles to keeping Lily safe had multiplied exponentially. Yet as he watched Grace carefully re-sew the deerskin map into Mr. Patch's, Reed felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the stirring of hope. For the first time since finding Lily, he wasn't facing these challenges alone. Whether that made their situation safer or more dangerous remained to be seen. The days following Lily's illness brought subtle shifts to the cabin's atmosphere. The child recovered quickly, as Grace had predicted, but Reed found himself watching her more closely, alert for any sign of relapse. The discovery of the map fragment had added a new dimension to his protectiveness. Grace continued her visits, now 3 times weekly, twice for Lily's education and once to check her health. Each visit seemed to ease the wariness between doctor and rancher, replacing it with something neither was quite ready to name. One crisp afternoon, while Grace helped Lily practice her letters at the table, Reed found himself observing them from the doorway. The scene stirred something profound within him, a vision of what family might look like, a glimpse of possibilities he'd long ago abandoned. Grace looked up, catching his gaze. A faint blush colored her cheeks before she returned her attention to Lily's slate. The moment passed quickly, but its effect lingered. Later, after Grace departed, Lily asked to visit the creek again. The afternoon was unusually warm for late autumn, a brief reprieve before winter's approach. Reed agreed, thinking the fresh air would strengthen her recovery. At the creekside, Lily sat on their usual log, trailing her fingers in the cold water. Dr. Grace says you were a soldier, she said suddenly. Reed stiffened slightly. Did she? She said that's why you stand so straight and check all around when we go places. Lily looked up at him. Did you fight Indians? The directness of the question caught Reed off guard. Why do you ask? Tommy Wilson at the store told Martha that's why you live alone, because you killed Indians and now you're hiding. Lily's expression was troubled. But Mama said her mama was Indian. So if you killed Indians, why are you helping me? Reed sat beside her, choosing his words carefully. Lily, a long time ago, I was a soldier. And yes, there were conflicts between soldiers and Indian tribes. But I never wanted to hurt anyone. Sometimes we're asked to do things that don't feel right, and we have to make difficult choices. Did you make a difficult choice? Lily's green eyes held a wisdom beyond her years. Yes, Reed admitted. I chose to help someone escape instead of following orders that would have hurt them. Like you helped me? Something like that. Reed picked up a smooth stone, turning it over in his palm. The person I helped was a Lakota woman with a little girl. They might have been related to your mother. Lily considered this solemnly. So you're not hiding because you did bad things. You're hiding because you did a good thing that other soldiers thought was bad. The simple clarity of her assessment startled Reed. That's one way to look at it. I think that's why Mr. Patches likes you, Lily declared, the matter apparently settled in her mind. She reached for the stone in Reed's hand. Teach me to skip it again. That evening, as Reed prepared supper, he reflected on Lily's questions. The child had a way of cutting through complexities to find essential truths, a gift that was both disconcerting and refreshing. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Max barked once in greeting rather than warning, signaling a familiar visitor. Reed opened the door to find Samuel Kingston, his expression uncharacteristically grave. "Evening, Nate," Samuel said, stepping inside and nodding to Lily, who was setting the table. "Got a moment to speak privately?" "Lily, would you check if the chickens are all in their coop?" Reed asked. When she'd gone outside with Max, he turned to Samuel. "What's happened?" "Two things. Neither good." Samuel kept his voice low. "First, ravens hit another homestead near Helena. This time they were specifically asking about a doll before they killed the family." Reed's jaw tightened. "And the second? Crawford arrives in 3 days, not next month as expected. Circuit route changed suddenly." The news hit Reed like a physical blow. He'd been counting on more time to prepare to establish himself as Lily's guardian before facing his former commanding officer. "Does he know about Lily?" Samuel shook his head. "Not specifically, but Reese has been asking questions about you taking in an orphan. Won't take much for Crawford to make connections once he arrives." "Anything else I should know?" Reed pressed, sensing Samuel was holding something back. Samuel hesitated. "That young man asking about you in town. Tall, fair-haired, with the scar on his neck. He's been seen talking to some rough types at the saloon. But here's the strange part. I overheard him asking Martha if she'd seen any children with Lakota jewelry or dolls." The old man's eyes met Reed's. He specifically mentioned a doll with mismatched button eyes. Reed's jaw tightened. "Mr. Patches." "Exactly. Could be nothing, but—" Samuel lowered his voice. "The way Martha described him, he sounded like he might have some Lakota blood himself despite the fair hair. Made me wonder if he might be connected to Lily's family somehow." Reed moved to the window, watching Lily counting chickens in the fading light, Max faithfully at her side. "I need to speak with Greyhawk." Samuel raised his eyebrows. "The Lakota scout? Thought you two had an understanding to keep your distance." "Circumstances have changed." Reed turned back to his friend. "I need to know if there's a connection between Lily's family and Morning Star, and whether the Ravens are working for Crawford." "There's something else," Samuel added, lowering his voice further. "A young man's been asking about Sarah Blackfeather in Helena. Fair-haired, maybe 20, has a nasty scar on his neck. Claims to be looking for his sister and her family." "Could be a Ravens trap," Reed cautioned. "Maybe," Samuel conceded. "But he seemed genuinely grieved when talking about Sarah. Carries a photograph of her. Might be worth knowing if Lily has other living relatives out there." "Dangerous waters, son," Samuel warned. "Greyhawk may have tolerated your presence these past years because of what you did for his people, but actively seeking him out." "I don't have a choice," Reed said firmly. "Not if I want to keep Lily safe." Samuel studied him for a moment, then nodded. "I'll get word to him. Sacred Willow Creek tomorrow at sunset." After Samuel departed and Lily was asleep, Reed sat cleaning his pistol by the fire, mentally preparing for tomorrow's meeting. Greyhawk had been a Lakota scout for the Army before the massacre, one of the few who survived because he'd been away delivering messages. When he returned to find his people slaughtered, he'd tracked down Reed, one of the few soldiers he knew had tried to help. Their last meeting 3 years ago had ended with an uneasy truce. Greyhawk had said, "You saved some, but not enough. When you are ready to truly atone, I will know." Since then, Reed had anonymously delivered supplies to the Lakota settlement each month, leaving them at a designated spot without making contact. Now he would be breaking that pattern, potentially disrupting the fragile peace they'd established. The next day passed slowly. Reed kept Lily occupied with simple chores and reading practice, trying to maintain normalcy despite his growing tension. As sunset approached, he made arrangements for her to stay with Martha Winters in town while he conducted his business. "Will Dr. Grace be there?" Lily asked as they rode toward Silver Creek. "No, she'll be at her clinic," Reed replied, "but Martha has a new kitten she said you could play with." Lily seemed satisfied with this, though she insisted on bringing Mr. Patches along. Reed had carefully examined the doll after re-sewing the map fragment back inside, ensuring the hidden pocket was undetectable. After settling Lily with a delighted Martha, Reed rode towards Sacred Willow Creek, a secluded spot about 5 miles from town. The sun hung low on the horizon, painting the landscape in amber and gold as he arrived at the meeting place. He waited nearly an hour, beginning to think Greyhawk wouldn't come, when a voice spoke from directly behind him. "The man who walks with ghosts seeks me again." Reed turned slowly to find Greyhawk standing there, seemingly materializing from the shadows. At 45, the Lakota warrior remained imposing, tall and lean, with a single silver streak running through his black hair. A long scar crossed his right cheekbone, a reminder of their shared history. "Thank you for coming," Reed said, inclining his head respectfully. "I come not for you, but because of the child." Greyhawk's dark eyes revealed nothing. "The daughter of Sarah Blackfeather." Reed couldn't hide his surprise. "You know of her?" "I know all that concerns my sister's family." Greyhawk moved forward, seating himself on a fallen log. "Morningstar was my mother, Sarah, her granddaughter." The connection stunned Reed. "Then Lily is your grandniece." Greyhawk's expression softened slightly at the mention of the child. "The last of our bloodline." Reed processed this revelation. "The woman I helped escape that night, was she Morningstar?" Greyhawk nodded once. "My mother. She carried Sarah, who was just a child then. You were wounded helping them." "Crawford shot me when I interfered," Reed confirmed. "I thought they might not have survived. They reached our allied tribe to the north. My mother lived 10 more years, always speaking of the brave soldier who saved them." Greyhawk's gaze pierced Reed. "She forgave you your part in that day." "I have been slower to do so." Reed hesitated before asking, "Sarah had a brother, didn't she?" Lily mentioned an Uncle Tommy. Greyhawk's expression tightened. "Thomas, yes, he left the tribe years ago after a disagreement with Sarah about her marriage. Some believed he turned against our ways." He studied Reed intently. "There are rumors he rides with outlaws now, though I cannot say which ones. If he lives, he would be Lily's only blood relative, besides myself." "Do you think he could be involved with the Ravens?" Reed asked, connecting the pieces. "The spirits do not reveal all paths to me," Greyhawk replied cryptically. "But if Thomas still lives, he may yet play a role in this unfolding story." Reed accepted this without protest. "I'm not seeking forgiveness. I'm seeking protection for Lily. Crawford is coming to Silver Creek, and I believe he's connected to the Ravens gang that killed Sarah and her husband." "Because of the map," Greyhawk stated matter-of-factly. "You know about that too?" "I possess the other half." Greyhawk reached into a pouch at his waist, extracting a piece of deerskin similar to the one in Mr. Patch's. "My mother entrusted it to me before her death. Sarah carried the other portion, sewn into the doll she made for Lily." "What does it lead to? The lost gold of Spirit Mountain?" Reed asked. Greyhawk's expression remained impassive. "More than gold. The sacred burial ground of our chiefs, and yes, offerings of value accumulated over generations. My mother was its guardian, as her mother before her. And now Lily is the last of that line," Reed realized, "making her the rightful guardian." "When she comes of age," Greyhawk confirmed. "Until then, the secret must be protected." Greyhawk studied Reed with penetrating eyes. "You are not the only one connected to my family through fate's twisting path. The woman doctor, she carries the spirit of Strong Wolf, my sister's son, and my finest warrior." Reed's brow furrowed in confusion. "The child Swift Eagle took in," Greyhawk explained. "She was Strong Wolf's blood sister, separated by the sickness that took their parents. He searched for her for many years before finding her trail, only to die in Crawford's attack before they could reunite. She does not know this connection yet. Swift Eagle thought the knowledge would bring her only pain." Reed thought of Crawford's imminent arrival, of the Ravens gang closing in. "I intend to petition for legal guardianship of Lily, but Crawford will be the presiding judge." Greyhawk's face hardened. "The butcher who ordered our village destroyed, judging the fate of our last bloodkeeper? The spirits have a dark sense of justice." "I need your help," Reed said plainly. "Not for myself, but for Lily, and for honoring the trust Morningstar placed in both of us." For several long moments, Greyhawk studied him, as if searching for something in Reed's expression. Finally, he spoke. "You have changed, Nathaniel Reed. The weight you carry has shaped you differently than when we last met. Lily has changed me, Reed admitted. Greyhawk nodded slowly. The child of two worlds often brings transformation. He rose, decision apparently made. I will help you protect her, but not in the white man's court. Bring her to our settlement the night before Crawford arrives. If he cannot find her, he cannot claim her. Running would only confirm guilt in his eyes, Reed argued. He would never stop hunting her, hunting all of us. What do you propose instead? Reed outlined his plan to pursue legal guardianship while Grace helped document Lily's Lakota heritage. With Greyhawk's testimony as a blood relative, they could establish legitimate claim to protect both Lily and her inheritance. The doctor woman, Greyhawk said thoughtfully. She walks between worlds as well. Swift Eagle's adopted daughter. Reed's surprise must have shown on his face, for Greyhawk almost smiled. We know of Dr. Holloway. She honors both paths, treating all who seek her help regardless of skin color. She's been teaching Lily, caring for her. I trust her, Reed said, realizing the truth of his words as he spoke them. Greyhawk considered this. I will meet with you and the doctor before Crawford arrives. Together we will decide the path forward. He handed Reed a small leather pouch. Herbs for the child's strength after her illness. My mother's remedy. As they parted ways, Greyhawk called after Reed. The Ravens will move soon. Their leader seeks not just gold, but vengeance. Watch the shadows, Nathaniel Reed. Not all enemies announce themselves with war cries. The cryptic warning followed Reed all the way back to town, where he collected a sleepy Lily from Martha's care. On the ride home, Lily nestled against his chest, Mr. Patches clutched securely in her arms. Did you finish your business, Mr. Nate? She asked through a yawn. Almost, Reed replied, his arms tightening protectively around her. But we're making progress. The night sky stretched vast and star-filled above them as they rode home, the future uncertain but the path clearer than before. Whatever came next, Reed knew one thing with absolute certainty. The promise he'd made to this child now extended to her heritage, her bloodline, and the sacred trust her family had carried for generations. Some burdens, he was learning, became lighter when accepted fully, and some promises, once made, reshaped the very soul of the one who made them. The following morning brought a crystalline autumn day, the kind where every color seemed impossibly vivid against the azure sky. Reed woke before dawn, restless after a night of fragmented sleep. Greyhawk's warning about the ravens moving soon had infused his dreams with shadowy figures and Lily's frightened cries. Checking that Lily still slept peacefully in her loft, Reed stepped onto the porch with his coffee. The sun was just breaking over the eastern hills, painting the frost-covered ground in shimmering gold. The beauty of it struck him anew, this land that had become his sanctuary now faced with threats from his past. His thoughts turned to Grace. She would be coming today for Lily's lesson, and he needed to tell her about his meeting with Greyhawk. The realization that he was eager to see her, beyond just sharing information, caught him off guard. Later that morning, as Grace's wagon approached, Reed felt an unexpected tightness in his chest. She was dressed more practically than usual in a simple blue dress and woolen shawl, her dark hair braided and pinned up. The sight of her sent a rush of warmth through him that had nothing to do with the strengthening sunlight. Mr. Holloway, he greeted her, helping her down from the wagon. Mr. Reed. Her smile seemed to come more easily now. How is our patient today? Fully recovered and excited for her lesson, Reed replied, but there are developments we should discuss first. Inside, Lily greeted Grace with a spontaneous hug that momentarily startled the doctor before she returned the embrace. Reed sent Lily to gather eggs for lunch while he shared his meeting with Greyhawk, including the revelation of his blood relation to Lily. So she truly is the granddaughter of Morning Star, Grace said thoughtfully, the last of a sacred lineage. And apparently the rightful guardian of whatever treasure the map leads to, Reed added. Greyhawk has the other half. Grace's expression grew troubled. This complicates matters significantly. If Crawford truly is connected to the Ravens in seeking the map, he'll use every legal means to gain custody of Lily, Reed finished. And if that fails, the implication hung heavily between them. Grace reached across the table, her hand covering his in a gesture of solidarity that felt surprisingly natural. We should speak with Sheriff Carter, she suggested. Establish your claim to guardianship before Crawford arrives. Reed nodded agreement. I'd planned to ride into town this afternoon. I'll accompany you, Grace said decisively. My testimony as Lily's physician and teacher will strengthen your case. The unexpected support warmed Reed more than he cared to admit. When Lily returned with the eggs, chattering about naming the new chicks, he found himself wondering how this small person had so completely transformed his solitary existence in such a short time, and how Grace had so naturally become part of their unlikely circle. After Lily's lesson, the three rode into Silver Creek together. The town bustled with unusual activity, merchants stocking extra supplies, and townspeople sprucing up storefronts in preparation for Judge Crawford's arrival. Like preparing for royalty, Reed muttered as they hitched their horses outside the sheriff's office. Crawford's circuit decisions affect everyone's lives here, Grace replied. People believe showing respect might influence his rulings. It won't, Reed said flatly. Sheriff Logan Carter looked up from his desk as they entered, his weathered face registering mild surprise at seeing Reed and Grace together. At 50, Carter had the bearing of a man who'd seen enough to be cautious, but not so much that he'd grown cynical. Dr. Holloway, Mr. Reed, he corrected them, setting aside paperwork. What brings you both here today? A legal matter, Sheriff, Grace explained, regarding Lily Williams. Carter gestured toward chairs. The orphan you took in, he said to Reed. Deputy Reese mentioned something about it. Reed tensed at the mention of Reese but kept his expression neutral. I intend to petition for legal guardianship. Dr. Holloway has been caring for her health and education. Carter studied them thoughtfully. Usually such petitions go directly to the judge. We wanted to establish the facts with you first, Grace said smoothly, given the unusual circumstances. For the next hour, they outlined the situation, finding Lily after her parents' murder, her recovery at Reed's ranch, and Grace's involvement in her care. They carefully omitted any mention of the map or Lily's connection to the Lakota treasure, presenting it simply as a case of an orphaned child needing a home. Carter listened attentively, asking occasional questions. When they finished, he leaned back in his chair, expression troubled. I appreciate your forthright approach, he said finally. But I should warn you, Judge Crawford has particular views on suitable guardianship. A single man with, he hesitated, choosing his words carefully, with your background, Mr. Reed, might face challenges, especially for a child with mixed heritage. Is that your opinion, Sheriff, or Crawford's? Reed asked evenly. Carter met his gaze directly. Crawford believes in certain natural orders. Children with white fathers, in his view, belong in white households, preferably with married couples of good standing. And children with Lakota mothers, Grace pressed. Carter's expression darkened. The judge has been known to place such children in government schools far from their native influences. Reed's hands clenched involuntarily. The notorious government schools were effectively prisons designed to strip native children of their culture, language, and identity. That's not going to happen, Reed stated, his voice low but firm. Carter studied him for a moment. You feel strongly about this girl. She deserves protection and respect for both sides of her heritage, Reed replied. I made her a promise. Promises matter to you, Taima, Carter observed. That's something in your favor. He reached for a ledger, opening it to a fresh page. I'll record your intent to petition. Crawford arrives day after tomorrow. The hearing would likely be set for the following morning. As they rose to leave, Carter added, a word of advice, Deputy Reese has taken unusual interest in this matter. Might be wise to keep the child close until the hearing. Outside, Reed helped Grace into her wagon, their conversation subdued by Carter's warnings. Crawford hasn't changed, Reed said grimly, still determined to erase anything that doesn't fit his vision of proper order. Grace studied him. You truly hate him, don't you? Hate requires passion, Reed replied. What I feel for Crawford is colder. He represents everything I once blindly served before I understood the cost. They agreed that Grace would speak with Greyhawk to arrange a meeting, while Reed would prepare documentation proving his ability to provide for Lily. As Grace prepared to depart for her afternoon patients, Deputy Reese emerged from the saloon across the street, his gaze fixing on them with undisguised interest. We're being watched, Grace murmured. Reed nodded almost imperceptibly. It begins. That evening, after returning to the ranch with supplies for the coming days, Reed sat on the porch, watching Lily play with Max in the yard. The simple joy of her laughter contrasted sharply with the gathering threats. He'd faced danger before, but never with so much at stake. A movement at the edge of the trees caught his attention, a flash of something that didn't belong. Reed casually stood, hand dropping to his sidearm. "Lily," he called calmly, "time to come inside for supper." The child looked up, about to protest, when something in his expression stopped her. Without question, she called Max and hurried toward the cabin. As she passed, Reed placed a protective hand on her shoulder, scanning the tree line. Nothing moved, but the sensation of being watched remained. Reed backed slowly toward the door, unwilling to turn his back on the gathering darkness. Only when they were safely inside, door barred, and rifle within reach, did he allow himself to relax slightly. "Is something wrong, Lily asked, sensing his tension. Reed forced a smile. "Just a precaution. Sometimes wolves come close to the cabin this time of year." Lily accepted this explanation, but as Reed prepared their meal, he caught her whispering to Mr. Patches. "Don't worry," she said softly. "Mr. Nate won't let the bad men find us." He promised. The child's implicit trust weighed heavily on Reed as night descended. Outside, the wind picked up, branches scraping against the cabin walls like spectral fingers seeking entry. Reed checked his weapons again, placing them strategically around the small space. Whatever or whoever had been watching from the trees, one thing was certain. The peaceful existence he'd carefully constructed was unraveling. Crawford's impending arrival had set forces in motion that would demand a reckoning with his past. As he tucked Lily into bed, her small hand caught his. "Are you scared, Mr. Nate?" The question caught him off guard. "What makes you ask that?" "You keep checking the windows and touching your gun," Lily observed with a child's directness. "Mama used to do that too before." Reed sat on the edge of her bed, choosing honesty over false comfort. "I'm not scared, Lily. I'm careful. There's a difference. Being careful means you're ready for whatever might happen." She considered this. "Is it because the judge is coming?" "Martha told me a judge decides important things." "That's part of it," Reed acknowledged. "The judge will decide if you can stay with me." Lily's eyes widened. "What if he says no?" Reed took her small hand in his. "Then we'll find another way. But I meant what I promised you, Lily. I'll keep you safe no matter what." "Dr. Grace will help too," Lily stated with certainty. "She looks at you the way Mama looked at Papa." Reed felt heat rise in his face, grateful for the dim lamplight. "It's time to sleep now. Tomorrow will be a busy day." Later, as Reed sat by the fire keeping watch, he reflected on Lily's startling observation about Grace. "She looks at you the way Mama looked at Papa." The child's innocent words had touched on something Reed had been reluctant to acknowledge. His growing feelings for Grace weren't merely gratitude or convenience. They represented something he'd sworn never to risk again after losing his sister. Vulnerability, opening himself to the possibility of loss once more. "Dr. Grace will help too," Lily had said with complete certainty, trusting in the bonds forming between them all. The thought both comforted and unsettled him. Reed hadn't relied on anyone since Emma died. Having others depend on him was one thing, a responsibility he could bear. But allowing himself to need them in return, that was a far more frightening prospect. Outside, a twig snapped in the darkness. Reed was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand, all personal reflections forgotten. He moved silently to the window, peering through a narrow gap in the curtains. For a moment, he saw nothing. Then a shadow detached itself from the trees, a mounted figure observing the cabin. The rider remained motionless for several long minutes before turning the horse and melting back into the forest. The figure melted back into the trees, but Reed remained watchful until dawn broke. This wasn't just a threat to him anymore. Crawford's arrival had set in motion forces that endangered everything new and fragile in his life. Lily's safety, Grace's reputation in town, and the tentative trust growing between them all. As light slowly filled the cabin, Reed watched Lily's peaceful sleep from below. The weight of his rifle across his knees reminded him of countless night watches during the war. But then he'd been guarding strangers, following orders he didn't always understand. Now he protected what was becoming most precious to him. The solitude he'd cultivated for years, suddenly seemed hollow compared to what he stood to lose, and what he might yet gain if they survived what was coming. Dawn broke with muted colors over Silver Creek, heavy clouds promising snow by nightfall. Reed stood on his porch watching the horizon, his breath forming small clouds in the chill air. Last night's visitor hadn't returned, but the sense of approaching danger remained palpable. Today would be their last day of preparation before Crawford arrived. Reed had spent the early hours mentally cataloging every possible contingency, each potential threat. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him with physical force, not just for Lily's safety, but for her future, her heritage, and the sacred trust her bloodline carried. By mid-morning, Grace arrived as promised, her wagon loaded with supplies and documents. Her face showed strain, shadows beneath her eyes suggesting a sleepless night. "Any trouble?" Reed asked quietly as he helped unload her cargo. "Not directly," Grace replied, "but Reese was asking questions at the clinic yesterday. Very specific questions about Lily and you." Reed's jaw tightened. "What kind of questions?" "About your past, whether I'd noticed any violent tendencies." Grace's expression hardened. "I informed him my patient and relationships are confidential, but he implied continuing to help you might damage my standing in town." "Grace?" Reed began, the use of her first name unconscious. "Don't," she interrupted. "Threats from men like Reese aren't new to me. I didn't abandon my patients among the Lakota when settlers demanded it, and I won't abandon you or Lily now." The fierce determination in her eyes stirred something in Reed's chest. Before he could respond, Lily burst from the cabin, rushing to embrace Grace. As sunset approached, Reed grew increasingly vigilant. He positioned Lily away from windows, kept his rifle within reach, and instructed Max to remain on the porch as an early warning system. Greyhawk arrived with the first stars, approaching so silently that even Max barely registered his presence before he stood at the edge of the clearing. Reed met him halfway, noting that the Lakota warrior carried no visible weapons yet radiated readiness for conflict. Inside, Greyhawk's imposing presence filled the small cabin. Lily watched him with wide, curious eyes, clutching Mr. Patches tightly. "Hello," she said finally. "Are you an Indian chief?" A rare smile touched Greyhawk's lips. "I am a warrior of the Lakota, and you, little one, are the daughter of my blood." Lily's eyes widened. "Really?" "Your grandmother's mother was my mother," Greyhawk explained, kneeling to her level, "making you my family." "Like Mr. Nate?" Lily asked innocently. Greyhawk's gaze flicked to Reed. "No, little one. I am your family by blood. Nathaniel Reed is your family by choice." The distinction was made without judgment, a simple statement of fact. While Lily showed Greyhawk her slate and books, the adults spoke in low voices near the fireplace. "Crawford arrives tomorrow," Reed said. "The hearing will likely be the following day." "He will use the law to claim her," Greyhawk predicted. "And when he has her, he will find the map." "Can't we just give him the map?" Grace suggested. "Remove Lily from the equation entirely?" Greyhawk shook his head. "The map leads to our ancestors' sacred resting place. Giving it to Crawford would desecrate generations of Lakota chiefs and holy men." "And Lily is the last legitimate guardian of that knowledge," Reed added, "according to your tradition." "Yes." Greyhawk removed the second half of the map from a pouch at his waist. "Together, these show the true location, hidden within natural landmarks only the initiated would recognize." Grace studied the pieces when placed side by side. Spirit Mountain, the river fork. These could be dozens of places without the proper context. "Exactly." Greyhawk nodded approval. "Our ancestors were wise." Their planning continued late into the evening, weighing options, anticipating Crawford's moves. Reed found himself impressed by Greyhawk's strategic thinking. The warrior had clearly spent years observing white legal systems, understanding their weaknesses and strengths. "I will attend the hearing," Greyhawk decided. "As Lily's blood relative, I have standing to speak." "Crawford will recognize you," Reed warned. "Let him," Greyhawk's expression hardened. It is time he faced one who survived his butchery. After Greyhawk departed, promising to return before the hearing, Reed found Grace still sitting at the table, studying the reassembled map pieces by lamplight. "Something troubling you?" he asked quietly, mindful of Lily sleeping in the loft above. "This location," Grace pointed to a formation marked by symbols. "It's not where most settlers would look, based on the landscape. It's actually much closer to Silver Creek than I realized. The realization that the sacred site was so near, perhaps less than a day's ride, changed the tactical situation significantly. If Crawford suspected the location, he might move quickly once he arrived. A soft knock at the door jolted Reed from his thoughts. He grabbed his rifle, approaching cautiously. "Who's there?" "A friend," came a young male voice, barely audible. Reed opened the door a crack, pistol ready, to find a young man of perhaps 20 standing on his porch. Fair-haired and tall, with his collar pulled high against the cold, he matched Samuel's description of the stranger asking questions in town. "State your business," Reed demanded, not lowering his weapon. "My name is Thomas Blackfeather," the young man said, his voice steady despite the gun pointed at him. "Sarah was my sister. Lily is my niece." Reed's shock must have shown, for the young man continued hurriedly. "I've been tracking the Ravens gang for months. They're coming here tonight, for Lily and the map." Grace joined Reed at the door, her expression cautious but curious. "Prove your connection," she insisted. Thomas slowly reached into his coat, withdrawing a photograph, identical to the one Reed had found with Lily's parents, but including a third figure, a younger Thomas standing beside his sister. "How did you find us?" Reed asked, lowering his pistol slightly. "I've been with them, the Ravens, pretending to seek revenge against the Lakota who corrupted my sister." Bitterness edged his voice. "But really, I've been waiting for a chance to warn anyone they targeted." "Why come to us now?" Grace pressed. "Because they're making their move tonight." Thomas glanced nervously over his shoulder. "Black Eagle is Crawford's son. Everyone thinks he died in a hunting accident years ago, but he's been leading the Ravens in secret, doing his father's dirty work." Reed and Grace exchanged shocked glances as Thomas continued urgently. "They're gathered at the ridge clearing half a mile east. 6 men, including me. They'll attack before dawn when sleep is deepest." The pieces aligned with sickening clarity: Crawford's land claims, the focused attacks on Lakota families, Reese's interest in the doll. Reed made a swift decision. "We need to move Lily somewhere safe. The Lakota settlement." "I can guide you through the forest," Thomas offered. "There's a path the Ravens don't know." Reed studied the young man, weighing trust against caution. Then Thomas pulled down his collar, revealing a savage scar running from beneath his ear down his neck, a deliberately carved pattern that matched symbols on the map. "Black Eagle's work," he explained grimly, "when I wouldn't reveal what I knew about Morningstar's secret." Grace gasped softly, her medical eye recognizing the cruelty behind such an injury. Reed's decision solidified. The young man's wounds spoke truths his words merely confirmed. Within half an hour, they had awakened Lily, gathered essential supplies, and slipped from the cabin's back door. Thomas led them along a barely perceptible path, using landmarks invisible to untrained eyes. Reed carried Lily, who remained remarkably silent, seeming to understand instinctively the need for quiet. "You've been very brave," Grace whispered to her as they paused briefly in a small clearing. "Mama said sometimes we have to be quiet as mice and swift as deer," Lily replied softly, "when the bad men come." The simple statement revealed how Sarah had prepared her daughter, knowing the dangers that shadowed their family. Thomas stared at his niece, emotion clouding his features. She looked so much like Sarah at that age. They had traveled perhaps another quarter mile when Max suddenly froze, hackles rising. Reed immediately signaled for silence, handing Lily to Grace and moving forward to investigate. Through the trees, Reed spotted a mounted figure at a crossroads in the path. The rider's face was obscured by a mask shaped like an eagle's head, black feathers rustling in the night breeze. Black Eagle. Jason Crawford. Reed retreated silently, returning to where Grace and Thomas waited with Lily. "Black Eagle is blocking the direct path," he whispered. "They must have anticipated our route." "There's another way," Thomas said urgently. "Longer, but it circles around to the settlement from the north." Their progress slowed as they diverted northward, the path less defined and the terrain more challenging. As they navigated a steep ravine, distant voices reached them. The Ravens had discovered the abandoned cabin and were spreading out to search. "There's a sacred cave ahead," Thomas directed. "The entrance is hidden, but it leads directly to the northern edge of the settlement." The cave entrance appeared suddenly, a narrow fissure in a rock face, nearly invisible unless one knew exactly where to look. Inside, Thomas produced a small lantern, lighting it to reveal a tunnel stretching ahead, its walls decorated with ancient Lakota symbols. The passage of ancestors, Thomas explained softly, used for centuries by our people to move undetected across hunting grounds. After what seemed hours but was perhaps only 40 minutes, the tunnel began to slope upward. Fresh air filtered down, bringing the scent of pine and wood smoke. Greyhawk met them at the edge of the Lakota encampment, his expression betraying no surprise at their arrival. "The spirits warned of your coming," he said simply, "and of the danger that follows." Reed quickly explained the situation. Black Eagle's identity, the impending raid, and their plan to keep Lily safe while confronting Crawford at the hearing. Greyhawk listened impassively, then nodded once. "The child will be protected here. But you," he looked directly at Reed, "must face Crawford openly. Only by exposing his corruption in front of witnesses can you truly protect what Morningstar entrusted to her descendants." "That's our intention," Grace confirmed, producing Mr. Patches from her bag. "The map remains hidden within the doll. Should we leave it here as well?" Greyhawk considered this, then shook his head. "The Ravens would not hesitate to attack our settlement if they believed the map was here. Keep it with you. Use it as bait to expose Crawford's true nature." Dawn was approaching rapidly. If they were to reach Silver Creek in time for the hearing, they needed to depart immediately. Reed knelt before Lily, who had been watching the proceedings with solemn understanding. "You'll stay here with Thomas and Greyhawk while Dr. Grace and I go to town," he explained gently. "These are your people, Lily. Your family by blood. They'll keep you safe." Lily's small hands clutched his coat. "You'll come back for me?" "Nothing could prevent it," Reed promised. "When this is over, we will be together again." "With Dr. Grace, too?" Reed glanced at Grace, finding her watching them with glistening eyes. "Yes," he said with newfound certainty, "with Dr. Grace, too." As they mounted fresh horses provided by Greyhawk, Reed caught Thomas watching them anxiously. "Protect her with your life," Reed told the young man. "I will," Thomas vowed. "She's all the family I have left." The ride to Silver Creek was swift and tense, the eastern sky gradually lightening. They reached town just as businesses were beginning to open, the courthouse already showing lights in its windows. "Are you ready for this?" Grace asked quietly. "Crawford will recognize you." "Good," Reed replied, a decade of waiting evident in his voice. It's time he faced the consequences of his actions. Grace surprised him by taking his hand, her fingers warm despite the cold morning. "Whatever happens in there, remember you are not alone anymore." Reed's throat tightened with emotion. On impulse, he leaned forward, brushing his lips against hers in a brief, tender kiss. "For courage," he murmured. "I think we have plenty of that," she replied with a smile. "Let's go face your past and secure Lily's future." Together, they climbed the courthouse steps, ready to confront the man whose cruelty had set them on this collision course a decade ago. The courthouse's main chamber buzzed with voices as Reed and Grace entered. Silver Creek's residents had turned out in force, curious about the unusual guardianship case and eager to observe the distinguished visiting judge. Sheriff Carter nodded to them from near the front, his expression conveying cautious support. At the front of the room, Gerald Crawford arranged papers on the elevated desk. Though 10 years older, he remained unmistakable. The same imperious bearing, the same cold eyes, now framed by silver hair rather than brown. A heavy beard covered his lower face, adding gravitas to his judicial appearance. Deputy Reese stood near the judge's bench, his gaze sharpening when he spotted Reed and Grace. He leaned toward Crawford, whispering something that caused the judge to look up. For a heart-stopping moment, Crawford's eyes met Reed's across the crowded room. A flicker of uncertainty passed across the judge's face, recognition struggling against disbelief. Reed held his gaze steadily, offering no pretense of anonymity. Sheriff Carter approached them quietly. "Where's the child?" he asked, noticing Lily's absence. "Safe," Reed replied simply. "There have been developments. Crawford's been asking specifically about her since he arrived," Carter noted with concern. "Unusual interest for a routine guardianship case." A bailiff called the court to order. Crawford took his seat, his gaze sweeping the room with practiced authority. "First case," he announced. "Guardianship petition. Reed versus Territorial Authority regarding the minor child Lily Williams. Reed and Grace moved forward, standing before the bench. Crawford studied Reed intently, his eyes narrowing. "Mr. Reed," he began, consulting his papers. "Your petition states you found the child after her parents were murdered by bandits. Yet I see no child present." His tone sharpened. "Where is the minor in question?" "She's been placed in protective custody, Your Honor," Reed replied evenly, "due to threats against her safety." Crawford's eyebrows rose. "Threats? From whom?" "The same men who murdered her parents," Reed stated. "The Ravens gang, led by a man calling himself Black Eagle." A ripple of murmurs passed through the courtroom. The Ravens' reputation for brutality was well known throughout the territory. Crawford's expression remained skeptical. "And you believe this child is specifically targeted by notorious outlaws? That seems rather convenient for explaining her absence." "It's the truth," Grace interjected. "As Lily's physician, I've documented evidence of previous trauma consistent with being hunted." "Dr. Holloway," Crawford acknowledged coolly, "your medical credentials are not in question, but your objectivity might be, given your apparent attachment to Mr. Reed's case." Crawford turned his attention back to Reed. "You've provided no documentation of the child's heritage or family connections. For all this court knows, you could have abducted her yourself." "That's false," Reed responded, maintaining his composure. "Sheriff Carter has statements from witnesses who saw me discover the aftermath of the attack." "Hearsay," Crawford dismissed. "Without the child present, this petition cannot proceed." "Unless," his eyes narrowed, "you can produce a blood relative to confirm your account." The moment had arrived, the opening they'd anticipated. Reed nodded to the bailiff, who opened the side door. Greyhawk entered, his dignified presence immediately commanding attention. He wore traditional Lakota garments with a single eagle feather in his hair, marking his status as a tribal leader. Crawford's face drained of color at the sight of the Lakota warrior. For the first time, his judicial composure cracked, revealing the man beneath. "This is Greyhawk, brother of Morning Star of the Lakota Nation," Reed introduced. "He is Lily's great-uncle and can attest to her parentage and heritage." Greyhawk stepped forward, his eyes never leaving Crawford's face. "I know this man," he stated clearly. 10 years ago, when he was Major Crawford, he ordered the massacre of my mother's village. I have come to speak for my blood relation, Lily, daughter of Sarah Blackfeather, granddaughter of Morning Star." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Crawford slammed his gavel repeatedly, struggling to regain control. "This is outrageous," he declared. "This court will not be turned into a platform for ancient grievances and wild accusations." "They're not accusations, Your Honor," Reed replied, emphasizing the title with subtle irony. "They're statements of fact, just as it's a fact that your son, Jason Crawford, leads the Ravens gang under the name Black Eagle." Gasps rippled through the audience. Crawford's face contorted with rage. "My son died 5 years ago in a hunting accident. How dare you desecrate his memory with such slander?" "Your son lives," Greyhawk stated firmly. "He bears your cruelty and your greed. He has tortured and killed to find what you both seek." "Enough!" Crawford shouted, rising from his seat. "This hearing is suspended pending the production of the child. Sheriff, arrest these individuals for contempt and obstruction of justice." Sheriff Carter didn't move. "On what specific charges, Judge Crawford?" "Insubordination," Crawford sputtered. "You question me as well?" "I question only the legal basis for arrests," Carter replied steadily. "These are serious allegations being made in open court." Crawford's control was visibly slipping. "This is absurd, a conspiracy of lies." "Then perhaps you can explain why your son was seen leading armed men toward Mr. Reed's ranch last night," Grace asked, removing Mr. Patches from her medical bag. "And why there's such interest in this child's doll?" Crawford's eyes fixed on the rag doll with unmistakable recognition. "That is territorial evidence in an ongoing investigation," he declared. "Surrender it immediately." "Investigation into what, exactly?" Reed pressed. "The location of Spirit Mountain's gold? The sacred burial grounds of the Lakota chiefs?" "You know nothing," Crawford hissed, momentarily forgetting his audience as his mask of judicial propriety crumbled. "I know everything," Reed countered. "I know you've filed mining claims near lands you believe contain the Lakota treasure. I know you've used the Ravens to eliminate anyone with knowledge of the map's location. And I know you recognize me the moment I walked in, Lieutenant Nathaniel Reed, the man you shot and left for dead when he tried to stop your massacre. The courtroom had fallen completely silent, the spectators transfixed by the unfolding drama. Crawford stood rigid behind the bench, rage and calculation warring in his expression. These accusations are baseless, he finally said, struggling to reassert authority. Mr. Reed clearly harbors delusional grudges. This hearing is adjourned until... The courthouse doors burst open with a crash. Deputy Reese stumbled in, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead, his clothing disheveled. "Judge," he gasped, "the Ravens, they've been spotted riding into town. Black Eagles leading them." Crawford froze, caught in the trap of circumstance. Before he could respond, gunfire erupted outside. "Everyone stay calm," Sheriff Carter ordered, drawing his pistol. "Remain inside." Reed moved by quickly to Grace's side, positioning himself protectively as Greyhawk joined them. "They must have followed our trail from the settlement," he murmured. Outside, horses' hooves pounded on the packed snow of the main street. More gunfire erupted, followed by screams from townsfolk caught in the open. Sheriff Carter moved to the window, peering cautiously outside. "6 riders, heavily armed," he reported grimly. "They're surrounding the courthouse." A voice bellowed from outside. "Crawford, send out the half-breed's doll, and we'll leave your precious town standing." Reed recognized the voice with certainty, the same commanding tone as the father, but younger, harder. Jason Crawford, Black Eagle. Crawford's expression crumbled. Decades of arrogance and authority dissolved in the face of his exposed conspiracy. "What have you done, Gerald?" Sheriff Carter asked quietly. Before Crawford could answer, the courthouse windows shattered under a hail of gunfire. People screamed, diving for cover as glass rained down. Reed pulled Grace beneath a sturdy oak table, Greyhawk joining them in the makeshift shelter. "They're trying to flush us out," Reed assessed, checking his pistol, "or create enough chaos to grab the doll in the confusion." Another volley of shots peppered the building. Through the broken windows, Reed could see the Ravens taking positions around the courthouse, their leader identifiable by the Black Eagle mask covering the upper portion of his face. "Sheriff," Reed called, "is there a rear exit?" Carter nodded, already organizing terrified townspeople toward the back of the building. "Through the judge's chambers." Crawford stood paralyzed behind the bench, his authority and composure completely abandoned. "Jason," he whispered, barely audible above the chaos, "what have I created?" The courthouse door splintered under the impact of a battering ram. Black Eagle stepped through the wreckage, 2 Ravens flanking him with rifles raised. "Where is it?" he demanded, voice muffled behind his mask. "Where is the map?" His gaze locked on Grace, who still clutched Mr. Patches. With a gesture, he directed his men toward her. Black Eagle's eyes narrowed as he stared at Grace. "I know your face," he said with sudden recognition. "You're the spitting image of that warrior who nearly killed me before my father shot him down. Strong Wolf, they called him." Grace went pale, her grip on Mr. Patches tightening. "What did you say?" "Strong Wolf," Black Eagle repeated with cruel satisfaction. "A Lakota warrior who fought like a demon at the massacre. Kept screaming about protecting his ancestors while trying to reach the woman and child my father was targeting." Greyhawk moved to Grace's side. "It is time you knew, daughter of 2 worlds. Strong Wolf was my nephew, your brother by blood. He found you just before the attack, learned you had been adopted by Swift Eagle. He died trying to protect our mother and the path to you." Tears filled Grace's eyes. Decades of questions suddenly answered. "That's why Swift Eagle took me in. Not just mercy, but family obligation." "The circle completes," Greyhawk said solemnly. "Strong Wolf protected our mother so she could protect the secret. Now you protect the last daughter of our line, carrying his spirit forward." A new determination hardened in Grace's features as she faced Black Eagle. "Then I stand here not just as Lily's guardian, but as blood defender of Morningstar's legacy." Reed rose from cover, pistol aimed steadily. "That's far enough." Black Eagle laughed coldly. "The loyal lieutenant. My father thought you died a decade ago. He'll be disappointed to have missed the opportunity to finish the job properly." "Your father has his own problems," Reed replied, nodding toward Crawford, who stood frozen behind the bench. Judges who conspire with outlaws tend to face rather harsh sentences. Black Eagle turned toward his father, the mask hiding whatever emotions might have played across his features. You always taught me to take what I wanted, Father, to eliminate obstacles, to recognize that power is the only true authority. Jason, Crawford managed hoarsely, this has gone too far. It hasn't gone far enough, Black Eagle snarled. 10 years hunting for that map, executing your plans while you maintained your respectable facade. And now you disown me to save your reputation? The family drama provided the distraction Reed needed. He signaled Grace to move toward the back exit while keeping his pistol trained on Black Eagle. But one of the ravens spotted the movement. Boss, the woman's running with the doll. Black Eagle whirled, raising his pistol toward Grace. Reed fired instantly, his shot striking Black Eagle's arm. The outlaw leader howled in pain and rage as chaos erupted once more. Greyhawk seized the moment, launching himself at the nearest raven with a war cry that echoed through the courthouse. Sheriff Carter and several armed townsmen joined the fray, their combined resistance forcing the outlaws back momentarily. Reed fought his way to Grace, who had been cut off from the exit by the renewed gunfire. They barricaded themselves in the courthouse records room, but Reed knew it wouldn't hold the ravens for long. There's a cellar access behind those shelves, Grace said, pointing to a small door partially hidden. Martha mentioned it once. The pounding on the barricaded door intensified as they cleared the shelving. The cellar door opened to reveal stone steps descending into darkness. The window's too small for me, Reed realized, examining their only potential escape. But you could fit through. I'm not leaving you, Grace stated firmly. Like Mr. Patches and get to the Lakota settlement, Reed insisted. Lily's safety depends on protecting the map. The door above began to splinter. Time had run out. Grace, Reed said urgently, taking her face in his hands. I love you. I should have said it sooner. Now go. For Lily's sake. Tears glistened in Grace's eyes as she made her decision. Standing on tiptoe, she kissed him fiercely. This isn't goodbye, she whispered. I'll bring help. Reed boosted her toward the window. Grace wriggled through the narrow opening, Mr. Patches clutched securely to her chest. As she disappeared from view, the cellar door splintered open above. Reed drew his pistol, positioning himself at the base of the stairs. Black Eagle descended first, his mask now gone, revealing a face that was a younger version of Crawford's, marred by hatred and obsession. Where is she? He demanded. Beyond your reach, Reed replied calmly. Black Eagle's eyes narrowed as he surveyed the cellar, quickly spotting the open window. Shoot him, he ordered the man behind him, then follow the woman. Reed fired first, his shot catching the second raven in the shoulder. The man stumbled backward, colliding with others on the stairs. In the confusion, Reed lunged at Black Eagle, tackling him to the ground. They struggled fiercely, Black Eagle's youth offset by Reed's military training. The outlaw's gun discharged wildly, the bullet embedding itself in a wooden beam overhead. It's over, Jason, Reed said grimly. Your father's exposed, your gang surrounded. Never, Black Eagle snarled. The gold is mine by right, my birthright. It was never yours, came a new voice from the stairs. Judge Crawford descended slowly, a pistol in his trembling hand. None of this was supposed to happen, Jason. Black Eagle's expression contorted with rage. You made me what I am. Every lesson in taking what I wanted, in destroying obstacles, all your teachings. I wanted you to be strong, Crawford replied, his voice hollow. Not this. For a heartbeat, father and son stared at each other, decades of twisted ambition and corrupted legacy hanging between them. Then Black Eagle laughed, a chilling sound devoid of humor. You're weak, he spat. You always were. Crawford's face hardened, reminding Reed suddenly of the ruthless major who had ordered a village destroyed. I am many things, but weak was never one of them. With shocking swiftness, Crawford raised his pistol and fired. Black Eagle jerked backward, his expression frozen in eternal surprise as he collapsed. Reed stared in disbelief at Crawford, who lowered his smoking pistol slowly. We tamayo. Look what he's become, Crawford said, his voice hollow with regret. What I've made him become. This ends with us, here. The Crawford name once stood for something in this territory. His eyes, suddenly old and tired, met Reed's. Sometimes the only way to salvage honor is to cut away the rot. The remaining ravens were momentarily stunned by their leader's execution. Reed used the distraction to dive behind a shelving unit as Crawford turned his pistol toward him. 10 years overdue, Lieutenant Reed, Crawford said, advancing methodically. But some debts must eventually be paid. A gunshot echoed through the cellar, but it wasn't Crawford's weapon. The judge staggered, confusion crossing his features before he crumpled to the floor. Behind him stood Sheriff Carter, his expression grim but resolute. Enough blood has been shed in Silver Creek today, Carter declared, his pistol now trained on the remaining ravens. Drop your weapons, all of you. For a tense moment, the outlaws seemed ready to fight. Then, without Black Eagle's fanatical leadership, their resolve crumbled. One by one, they surrendered their firearms. Reed emerged cautiously from cover, scarcely believing the sudden turn of events. Carter nodded to him once, a silent acknowledgement of justice long delayed. Check if he's alive, Carter instructed, indicating Crawford's motionless form. Reed knelt beside his former commanding officer, finding a weak but present pulse. He'll live, he reported, to face justice for his crimes. Outside, townspeople were emerging cautiously, surveying the damage to their courthouse and Main Street. Martha Winters was already organizing care for those with minor injuries, while Samuel Kingston stood guard over the captured ravens. Quite a day in Silver Creek's history, Samuel commented as Reed approached. Judge turned criminal, outlaws in the courthouse, Lakota warrior fighting alongside settlers. A day of truth, Reed replied. Long overdue. As Sheriff Carter organized a posse to transport the prisoners to the territorial capital for trial, Reed found his thoughts turning eastward, where Grace and Lily awaited. The confrontation with Crawford was over, but the most important part of his journey still lay ahead. Greyhawk appeared at his side, seeming to read his thoughts. Go to them, he said simply. Your family waits. Family. The word resonated within Reed's heart as he mounted a borrowed horse and turned toward the rising sun. After a decade of solitude, of atonement, he had found something he never expected. Not just forgiveness for past sins, but a future built on love and trust. The Lakota settlement appeared on the horizon as afternoon sunlight broke through dispersing clouds. Smoke rose from lodge fires, creating a peaceful tableau against the snow-covered landscape. Reed's heart leapt when he spotted a small figure with dark hair, Lily, building a snow creature with other Lakota children. She looked up at the sound of approaching hoofbeats, her face transforming with joy when she recognized him. Mr. Nate, she cried, abandoning her snow creation and racing toward him. Reed dismounted just in time to catch her as she launched herself into his arms. The solid warmth of her, alive and safe, overwhelmed him with gratitude. You came back, Lily said, her small arms tight around his neck. I promised I would, he reminded her gently. And Dr. Grace, too, Lily added, looking over his shoulder expectantly. Reed turned to find Grace approaching, Mr. Patches clutched in one hand. Her face showed signs of exhaustion, but her eyes glowed with relief and something deeper when they met his. You're alive, she said simply, her voice catching. Thanks to Sheriff Carter, Reed replied. Crawford and Black Eagle are finished. The ravens captured. Grace closed the distance between them, propriety forgotten as she wrapped her arms around both him and Lily. For a long moment they stood together, a family forged in adversity and bound by something stronger than blood. That evening, Greyhawk drew Reed and Grace aside. The council has reached a decision about Spirit Mountain's gold, he informed them. With your help, we will use it to purchase land surrounding our sacred sites, protecting them legally from future threats. A wise decision, Grace approved. Additionally, Greyhawk continued, we wish to establish an education fund for children of both our peoples, a school where Lakota and settler children can learn together, preserving traditions while building understanding. That's incredibly forward-thinking, Reed said, impressed by the vision. Greyhawk elaborated further. The gold will also establish a legacy fund for Lakota children to learn trades and medicine. Part will create a medical clinic where both traditional healing and Dr. Grace's methods can help all people regardless of heritage. He gestured toward the peaceful settlement. And here, we will build permanent dwellings that honor our traditions while withstanding the harshest winters, homes with proper stoves and glass windows, a community gathering hall, and trading post where our craftspeople can sell their work directly instead of through exploitative traders. You've thought of everything, Grace said, clearly moved. Morningstar began this plan decades ago, Greyhawk explained. She foresaw a time when our people would need to adapt without losing our essence. The gold was never meant to enrich individuals, but to secure our future when the old ways alone could no longer sustain us. Reed nodded thoughtfully. A bridge between worlds, just like Lily. It was Strong Wolf's dream, Greyhawk said, looking at Grace. Your brother believed our future lay in understanding each other. He would be proud to see his sister helping to make it reality. Grace's hand moved unconsciously to touch a small leather pouch she now wore around her neck, containing a single eagle feather Greyhawk had given her, belonging to her brother. Two paths, one journey, she said softly, as it should have been all along. Greyhawk's normally stoic expression softened. Morningstar believed our future lay in finding balance between preservation and adaptation. Lily embodies that balance, as do you both, in your own way. 2 weeks later, the new circuit judge arrived from Helena, a thoughtful, fair-minded woman named Judge Eleanor Simmons, who had earned respect throughout the territory for her balanced approach to justice. This is an unusual case, she acknowledged during the hearing. But given the extraordinary circumstances and the evident bonds formed, I see no reason to deny Mr. Reed's petition. The child clearly thrives in his care. With a stroke of her pen, Judge Simmons officially declared Nathaniel Reed the legal guardian of Lily Williams. The small gathering in the repaired courthouse erupted in applause. However, the judge continued, raising her hand for silence. I do have one suggestion, if I may. Reed nodded respectfully. Of course, Your Honor. Judge Simmons smiled. In my experience, children benefit greatly from having both maternal and paternal influences. Dr. Holloway's involvement in Lily's care has been extensively documented in these proceedings. Perhaps a more permanent arrangement might be considered? Grace blushed as Samuel chuckled appreciatively. Reed cleared his throat, suddenly aware of every eye upon him. Your Honor is unusually perceptive, he managed. Such arrangements have indeed been discussed. 3 days later, in the small church of Silver Creek, Reed stood before the altar in his finest clothes, Samuel at his side as best man. The pews were filled with townspeople and members of the Lakota settlement, two communities united by their shared affection for the couple and the unusual child who had brought them together. Lily preceded Grace down the aisle, scattering pine needles and winter berries rather than traditional flowers. She wore a dress that combined white settler styling with Lakota beadwork, her dark hair crowned with a wreath of evergreen. When Grace appeared in the doorway, Reed felt his breath catch. She wore a simple gown of ivory silk, her dark hair loose around her shoulders in the Lakota tradition for brides. The ceremony combined Christian vows with Lakota blessing rituals, Greyhawk participating alongside the minister. When Reed and Grace exchanged rings, simple bands crafted by the town's blacksmith, Lily stepped forward unprompted, placing her small hand atop theirs. Now we're a real family, she declared with a child's certainty. Spring came early that year, the snow melting to reveal tender green shoots pushing through the softened earth. Reed's ranch, now properly the Reed family home, had expanded over the winter months. A new room had been added for Lily, the loft converted to a proper bedroom for Reed and Grace's medical office established in a small addition facing east. The first flowers were blooming in Grace's newly planted garden when she shared the news that their family would be expanding again by winter. Lily received the announcement with solemn delight, immediately informing Mr. Patches that he would need to help her be a good big sister. On a warm day in late April, Reed stood on the porch watching Grace teaching Lily to identify medicinal plants. Thomas had arrived for his weekly visit, bringing books from Samuel's store and news from town. The young man had found his place in Silver Creek, respected for both his Lakota heritage and his quick intelligence. You're a fortunate man, Nathaniel Reed, Thomas observed, following Reed's gaze to where Grace and Lily knelt in the garden. More than I deserve, Reed agreed quietly. Perhaps that's what redemption truly means, Thomas suggested. Not getting what we deserve, but being given what we need to become better than our past. As sunset painted the Montana sky in shades of amber and rose, Reed joined Grace and Lily in the garden. Together they walked to the small creek that cut through their property. the same spot where Reed had first taught Lily to skip stones after finding her. As they crested the small rise that overlooked their home, Reed paused, taking in the scene. Their cabin nestled against the backdrop of mountains, smoke curling from the chimney, Lily already at the porch with Max dancing excitedly around her. "Having second thoughts?" Grace asked, noticing his hesitation. Reed shook his head, drawing her close. "Just the opposite. I'm tracing the path that brought me here, from solitary survivor to this." His voice grew soft with wonder. "The promise I made to a frightened child beside that overturned wagon somehow led to all this. To you, to us, a future I never dared imagine." Grace's expression softened with understanding. "The man who atones," she murmured, using Greyhawk's name for him. "You've earned this peace, Nathaniel." Grace's expression softened with understanding. "The man who atones," she murmured, using Greyhawk's name for him. "You've earned this peace, Nathaniel." Reed kissed her gently as the day's final light gilded the landscape around them. Some journeys begin in darkness but lead eventually to light. Some promises, once made, reshape the very soul of the one who makes them. "Papa! Mama!" Lily called impatiently from the porch. "Hurry up! I'm hungry!" Reed and Grace exchanged smiles, quickening their pace. Their daughter, for that was what she had truly become, was waiting. And in the simple urgency of her call lay the most profound truth Reed had ever known. Love, once given freely, returns 100-fold in unexpected ways. "We're coming," he called back, his voice carrying across the land he had once thought would be his solitary refuge. "We're right behind you."